The evening air in Maplewood carried the crisp bite of autumn as Daniel Harris locked the doors of his modest auto repair shop and slid the keys into his worn-out jacket pocket, the same jacket he had been wearing since his wife passed away 3 years ago. Life had been simple but heavy: wake up early, work until his hands ached, go home to his 7-year-old son Ethan, and try to keep a smile on his face so Ethan wouldn't notice the constant exhaustion lurking in his eyes. That night, as Daniel drove his rusty old truck down the quiet road toward home, his thoughts were on the bills piling up and how he would stretch his paycheck until the end of the month. But his thoughts came to a halt when he noticed a small figure sitting alone on the bench by the bus stop under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp. Slowing down, he frowned. It was nearly 10 at night, too late for anyone to be waiting there, let alone a child. Pulling over, Daniel stepped out of his truck, his boots crunching against the gravel. The figure was a little girl, no older than 6, with tangled hair falling into her pale face, her tiny body curled up as if trying to disappear into herself. She clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest, her knees drawn up, and her clothes looked dirty, not just from the day but from nights spent without proper care. Daniel crouched a few feet away so he wouldn't frighten her. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice carrying the same gentleness he reserved for Ethan on nights when the boy had nightmares. The little girl looked up, startled, her wide brown eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I can't find my mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel felt a knot tighten in his chest. He asked her name, and she answered simply, "Lily," her grip on the teddy bear tightening as though it were her only shield against the world. Without hesitation, Daniel slipped off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders, feeling how cold her skin was beneath the fabric. "It's too late and too cold to be out here alone," he murmured, then offered his hand. She hesitated, her small frame shaking, but after a moment she placed her tiny fingers in his, trusting him in a way that made Daniel's heart ache. He guided her gently to his truck, buckled her in beside Ethan's old booster seat, and drove home, casting worried glances at her the whole way. When they arrived, Ethan, still awake and waiting for his dad, ran to the door, his eyes widening at the sight of the girl. Daniel introduced her as Lily, and before long Ethan was offering her cookies and showing her his toy cars, his childlike innocence breaking through her fear. For the first time that night, Daniel saw a flicker of a smile on her face. Still, as he watched the two children sitting together, Daniel couldn't shake the question burning in his mind: why was this little girl out here all alone, and where was the mother who should have been searching desperately for her? The following morning, Daniel awoke to the faint sound of laughter coming from the kitchen, a sound he hadn't heard in his house since before his wife passed away, and as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes and walked toward it, he found Ethan proudly showing Lily how to pour milk into her cereal without spilling, both of them giggling when a few drops splashed onto the table. The sight made something in Daniel's chest stir, a strange mixture of warmth and unease, because while he was glad the little girl was safe, he couldn't ignore the nagging thought that someone out there must be frantically searching for her. After breakfast, Daniel called the local police station to report that he had taken in a lost child, giving them her name, description, and everything she had told him the night before, but to his surprise the officer on the line could find no official missing person report that matched. No one named Lily, no 6-year-old girl fitting that description had been reported missing in the surrounding counties. The answer made Daniel's stomach sink. He wondered if Lily's mother hadn't reported her, or if something darker was at play. Yet in the days that followed, as he continued to work at the repair shop and care for both children, Lily's presence grew to feel natural, as though she had always been part of their home. She followed him around curiously while he fixed engines, sitting cross-legged on the floor and asking questions in her sweet, timid voice, and she clung to Ethan's side whenever they played in the yard, her laughter ringing out as Ethan taught her how to kick a ball or showed her his favorite hiding spots during tag. At night, however, Daniel often found her staring out the window, her small hand pressed against the glass as though she expected someone to come and take her home. One evening, after reading a story to both kids and tucking Ethan into bed, Daniel noticed Lily still sitting quietly, her teddy bear hugged tightly to her chest, and when he asked if she was all right, she looked up at him with wide eyes and asked in the smallest voice, "Do you think my mommy forgot me?" The question struck Daniel like a blow. He sat down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and assured her that no mother could ever truly forget her child, that maybe something had gone wrong but her mommy was surely searching for her. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Why had no one come forward? Why hadn't the police found anything? As he watched Lily finally drift to sleep on the couch, her teddy clutched under her chin, Daniel knew he was already too invested to step back. She wasn't just some lost girl anymore, she was part of their lives, and whether her family came for her tomorrow or never, Daniel felt a deep, unshakable responsibility to protect her. What he didn't know was that far away, in a world of wealth and power beyond his imagination, someone was indeed searching for Lily with desperation, and soon their paths would collide in a way that would forever change the quiet life he had built with Ethan. It was a rainy afternoon when the quiet rhythm of Daniel's small-town life shattered, the steady patter of raindrops against his workshop roof broken by the low hum of an unfamiliar engine, and when he stepped outside wiping grease from his hands, he froze at the sight of a sleek black car pulling into his gravel driveway, its tinted windows and polished chrome so out of place against the backdrop of his weathered home that it seemed as if a piece of another world had landed in Maplewood. Before he could process it, the back door opened and a tall woman emerged, her dark hair pulled into a graceful knot, her tailored coat shielding her from the rain as two imposing security men stepped out behind her, and instantly Daniel felt Ethan and Lily, who had been playing with chalk on the porch, retreat toward him, sensing the weight of this unexpected visit. The woman's eyes swept the yard until they landed on Lily, and in that moment the mask of composure she wore cracked, her expression breaking into raw emotion as she gasped, "Lily," with a voice that trembled between relief and disbelief. The little girl dropped her chalk and without hesitation sprinted across the wet grass, tears streaming down her face as she flung herself into the woman's arms, sobbing, "Mommy, I thought you'd never find me." Daniel stood rooted to the ground, trying to understand what he was witnessing, as the woman clutched Lily desperately, rocking her as if afraid she might vanish again. Finally, she lifted her gaze toward him, her striking features familiar in a way that made him think of glossy magazine covers he had once glimpsed while buying groceries, and with a voice steadier now, she said, "I'm Victoria Hayes, thank you for keeping my daughter safe." The name hit him with the force of recognition, Victoria Hayes, the billionaire businesswoman whose empire reached across industries, the kind of person people in Maplewood only read about in headlines. She explained in urgent tones that Lily had been kidnapped from their estate 2 weeks earlier, taken by people who had demanded ransom, and when the scheme had collapsed, they had abandoned Lily miles away, terrified and alone. Daniel's mind reeled at the revelation. The girl who had shared his dinner table and laughed alongside his son was not simply lost, she had survived something far darker. He nodded slowly, humbled by the gratitude in Victoria's eyes, but as she held Lily tighter, her gaze lingered on him with something else, hesitation, conflict, as though she were bracing herself for a truth even heavier than the story of a kidnapping. The rain poured harder, drumming against the car roof, and with a voice that trembled not with fear but with the weight of revelation, she whispered, "Daniel, there's something you don't know." Her eyes, sharp yet vulnerable, locked on his as she continued, "Lily isn't just my daughter. She's yours too." The world seemed to tilt beneath him, the sound of rain muffled against the roaring in his ears, as he stared at the woman who had just upended everything he thought he knew about his life, his son, and the little girl who had already captured his heart. Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat, the words echoing in his mind like thunder, "She's yours too." For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't think, as if the ground beneath him had disappeared, leaving him suspended in disbelief. He glanced at Lily, still nestled in her mother's embrace, her small hands clutching Victoria's coat, unaware of the tidal wave that had just crashed over him, and then at Ethan, who stood beside him with wide, uncertain eyes, sensing something had changed but not yet understanding what. "What do you mean, she's mine?" Daniel finally asked, his voice rough, more like a plea than a demand, and Victoria took a deep breath, rain dripping from her lashes as she explained, "Years ago, before she had built her empire, before her name had become synonymous with power, they had met briefly at a charity event, one night that neither had expected to shape their futures. She had discovered she was pregnant but chose to raise Lily alone, believing Daniel deserved a chance at a quiet life without the complications of her world, and by the time she had considered reaching out, her career and reputation had already placed her under constant scrutiny, so she had buried the truth deep, convincing herself she was protecting them both. The revelation struck Daniel like a storm, not just because of the hidden past but because it explained the unexplainable, the instant connection he'd felt with Lily, the way she had slipped so effortlessly into his heart as though she had always belonged. He looked down at Ethan, who tugged at his sleeve with tears brimming in his eyes and whispered, "Dad, does this mean Lily can't stay with us anymore?" And Daniel's chest tightened as he knelt, pulling Ethan into his arms while Victoria crouched down with Lily, their two worlds colliding in the smallest living room of a modest home. "No matter what, she's part of this family now," Daniel said firmly, his voice trembling with conviction as he wrapped both children close, feeling Lily's little arms circle his neck, her soft voice murmuring, "I don't want to go anywhere." Victoria, watching the scene, felt tears burn her eyes. The hardened exterior of a billionaire businesswoman crumbled, revealing a mother who, for all her wealth and power, had longed for nothing more than the safety of her child and the strength of someone who would love her unconditionally. She reached out, her hand brushing against Daniel's, and in that fragile moment of shared responsibility, forgiveness, and truth, they understood that Lily's future didn't belong to one world or the other, it belonged to both. The rain outside slowed, the storm giving way to a quiet stillness, as though the world itself had paused to witness this unlikely family forming. Daniel knew challenges lay ahead, legal battles, the scrutiny of the press, the merging of two vastly different lives, but as he looked at the two children in his arms and the woman before him, he also knew something else. Fate had given him not just a second chance at love but the family he never thought he would find again, and he wasn't going to let it slip away this time.